The theater world was rocked months ago when the coronavirus pandemic suspended all live events indefinitely. But for Baldwin Wallace University, the show must go on. Hi, I'm Sarah McCord, a student at Baldwin Wallace, and I'm here to take you behind the scenes of the virtual production of Spring Awakening. And trust me, this isn't your typical Zoom performance. We're going to talk with members of the cast and creative team to learn all about what it took to put together this virtual production. So welcome to the making of Awakening. Today I'm joined by Tesia Benson, who served as both the production manager and the costume designer for Spring Awakening. Keep listening to learn all about designing costumes in a pandemic and the collaboration it takes to put together a great show. How early did you start conceptualizing the costumes for Spring Awakening?
Actually, Vicki and I think we had our first conversation right after the opera opened, so sometime in February, sometime before spring break, we had our first conversation. And then everything happened. And we still kept working for a little bit, like things would get better. Like I think everybody, was like, this is only gonna be like a couple months, whatever, no biggie. Surprise.
Here we are.
And so, the conceptual work started early because it's always better, especially with a large musical, to start as early as you can, just because there's usually a lot of moving parts and you want to make sure you get all of, the pieces, parts going in the right direction. But it's I think a pretty simple musical in a lot of ways because of how the music is. So that kind of pop punk, kind of early 2000s, 2010 kind of sound. So there's that modern feeling juxtaposed with the idea that it's a Victorian story essentially. It kind of puts you in a place where there's only really, you don't have to have a lot of changes because of the way the show is structured. So there aren't a whole lot of costumes in the show in the original conception, and then what we've done since we kind of threw everything out the window. So
where did you find inspiration for your costume designs?
So early on, Vicki was like, she really wanted to explore how to combine the period and the modern together. And so we had a lot of conversations about how to make that happen. For me, I'm always personally interested in finding ways to utilize historical styles in modern contexts. I find that really interesting. I'm never personally super interested in reproducing a period fully on stage. That to me is less interesting. I'm more interested in what is the essence of a period and how does it translate through into modern fashion, right? Because like every time we wear a hoodie, we're like wearing something that's essentially a medieval garment. The only thing that makes it modern is a zipper.
I've never thought of it like that, but that is true.
So what we came to was that the women would have some sort of modern top, but then have a more traditionally looking Victorian bottom, and then the boys would do the opposite, right? So like the girls' hearts are open in a more modern way, right? But maybe they don't have the realization and the knowledge of sex, and the boys more have that primal feeling about sex, but they don't know how to they don't know how to present their emotions appropriately in the context of their life.
Okay.
So that's to me how I think about it, is like, oh, that makes sense why we would do it that way, because you've got this, like, what part of their experience in that late Victorian era is reflected in the costumes. So that was always part of the plan, right? And then it got simplified more once we had to like get things done really quickly.
How did you adapt your costume designs to work with the virtual performance?
I think the biggest shift came once we realized that it probably wasn't going to be an in-person audience, that this was probably going to turn into something that was more of a streamed thing. And I think that was when the biggest switch happened for me. I was actually still working on just finishing up my drawings the way they were. And I was actually having a really hard time with it because I personally am not dealing well with the uncertainty part of everything. Like for me, I'm a very structured person. And so I like to know what the plan is going to be. And that enables me to do my next step because I understand what 3 steps away are. And so that was taken away. And so it was taking me a really long time to finish the drawings. And then when that final switch happened, Vicki called me and was like, okay, we just have to throw it all out the window. And I was oh my God, thank goodness. Let's just I've been torturing myself over these drawings for a month. But yes, we're just going to throw this all out the window. I think once we decided that Vicky was like, well, we have to go really fast. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I do this all the time. And so for me, it was a release of the perfectionism that sometimes comes with showing students how to do it. That perfectionism of every little detail has to be perfect if we're going to build it. And like, this all has to be perfect, and kind of just throwing that out of the window. And how can we do this quickly? Because Vicki said to me, we need to be able to, after casting, do fittings right away.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can start filming right away, so we can get as much done before we get shut down. Yeah. I spent all this time, made all these sheets of like, here's a bunch of things we could buy on Amazon that feel kind of period, that are elastic waist. So when we fit them, all we have to do is pull the elastic. It's not a big deal. We're not like going to be held up and doing alterations a lot. And the same for the guys. Okay, well, what's the thing that would automatically say in our minds, schoolboy, and also something about it being oldie timey? And it's like, okay, vests. So what vest can I find on Amazon that has some of the details that we originally talked about, but would also come in a wide range of sizes? So what we ended up doing then was just buying all these skirts and all these vests, and pulling shirts for the guys, and buying tights for the girls, and doing it like without even knowing who was cast. And so buying it like you would for a baseball team, of little kids, right? And they would line you up as kids, so tallest to shortest, and just give you whatever it was in order. That's kind of the approach we took. And so I also generated these like lookbooks for the cast for what to bring in with their own measure, with their own costume, with their own clothing. So like, here's a bunch of things that I think are interesting. Just bring me whatever you have for your closet, and we'll put it together in the fitting. And so we had a really great time then. That was like, there was like this freedom there of like, okay, we just have to go with this and see. The parameters here are, there are no parameters in the sense that the only parameters that we need to get this done in a timely fashion, and it needs to feel modern on some level.
Did this process allow for more collaboration between yourself and the actors?
Yeah, totally. It opened up that conversation in a much different way, because you give the actor some images of like styles, and I also gave them like some color palette references. And then it kind of leaves them as part of the collaboration in a much different way than you would be in a traditional setting. Like, I always want to have a conversation about the actor, about what they need from the costume. Can you do your movements in the costume? But to have that more like one-on-one time where it's you and that person and you're making decisions that way is actually, I think, a lot of fun. Awesome. So we actually did these like crazy mass fittings over 2 evenings, where all the women came in on one day, all the men came in on another day, and Vicki was there, and they went 2 at a time coming in and out, and we were like, yes, no, what about that? What else do you have? So that was actually felt very freeing. There's something very freeing about it, to just be like, we are going to make decisions. We're just going to be convinced by our decisions. We're not going to overthink this. So I really appreciate that part of the process.
As a member of the creative team, how have you seen this virtual production make space for technical theater aspects?
So for me, at least in this process, we're acknowledging that tech is part of the artistic expression, that it's an important part of the artistic expression, that you need it in order to fully tell the story, instead of acting like all you need is words. Because of course there's an element of theater in which all you need is words, but all of us would not have chosen to do this as a career if there wasn't some valid value in it.
And there's a reason you watch plays instead of reading them. Like, it's more than just watching an actor deliver lines.
Absolutely. I was just talking with my makeup class, because I had done a demonstration video, and as I watched it back, I was like, oh my God, I'm making so many faces as I turn into this old woman. And I said to them, but honestly, I'm not too surprised I was doing this, because my favorite part of the tech process is when it's first dress and I'm going around, the dressing rooms, checking in with people, and you see this immediate change and the shift in the actors as they put on their costumes, as they put on their makeup. If they're doing any kind of character work, you start to see them acting differently, because the costumes and the makeup are like that last step that make you not you. They're the last physicalization of the character. You bring all that life to the stage, but I give you some tools to utilize. And so I'm glad that that is still part of what we're doing here in our process, and that we are making sure that we do that. So we actually had 2 students who took draping. So both Gwen and Bridget took draping last semester. And we were able, I talked with Vicki, I was like, we got to give, what's the balance? So the Vendela's first opening looks are totally draped, pattern made by those two, and with some help from the shop. You know, I think I was more stressed out about this process when it was in the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And once we just got good with it being unknown, once we just said, well, we have to be just kind of open to this process, that made it so easy, and it felt really easy. And then it was exciting. It was exciting because we were trying to figure out a new challenge. And at the end of the day, that's what's great about theater is, yes, there are always some things you're always going to do a certain way, but every show is going to have some kind of challenge. And so that was the challenge that was exciting to me.
Yeah.